Welcome to another episode of Electable. I'm Deb Chubb, and this podcast is sponsored by the Indiana Women's Action Movement. Today, we have just a treat for all of us. Christine Greig is here from Michigan, and she is a former state House representative in Michigan and was the House leader for 2 years as well, and has done a lot of work to get Democratic women elected in Michigan. And since leaving the state house, is doing more wonderful work to promote an agenda that includes policies that benefit women and children and all people instead of corporations. So first, Chris, thank you so much for being with me and doing this, because this is just really a thrill for me.
Well, thanks, Deb. I'm really excited to be here too. When I hear what's going on in Indiana and really trying to get women fired up, I just was really excited about it. A lot of you might not know, but I grew up in Indiana. I grew up in Plymouth, Indiana, just south of South Bend. I have 11 brothers and sisters. And most of them still live in Indiana too. So I have very strong Michigan-Indiana connection. And it was a lot of those Hoosier sensibilities that I brought with me to Michigan when I made that big leap at 50 years old to decide to run for office. And one of the reasons I did was because I felt there weren't enough voices from women in making good policy and good budget decisions too. Michigan was losing ground in terms of female representation in government. And I was going to do something about that. My particular district, I got to say, though, had a history of electing women and sending them to Lansing. So I certainly wasn't a first in my own district. But when I got up to Lansing, there were only, I think, 13 or 14 Democratic women out of 110 representatives in the state of Michigan's House. So I wanted to make it a point to have more women elected, and right away, I formed a leadership PAC, it's called, and raised money specifically to go to women candidates to help them not only get elected, but once they were elected, to be in leadership roles. So incredibly important, because you can be at the table, but you have a bigger voice when you're at the head of the table too. So I felt that was extremely important. And then in Michigan, we have pretty strict term limits. So I only had 3 terms to serve in the House. First term, getting my feet wet, deciding what to do. Second term, I actually served as the floor leader. So that's the person that's in charge of getting all your members in their seats, knowing what they're voting on, who's giving speeches, who's doing amendments, all of that, and it's considered the number 2 position in the caucus. And then as leader in my 3rd term, and I was only the second woman to lead a caucus in the House in Michigan's 130-year history.
Wow.
So we knew that was a problem too. But I got to say, when I was elected in that 3rd term, that was a huge wave of women getting elected. And as I served as leader, we actually reached 50-50. And even for a while, we had a vacancy, had more women than men serving in the House Democratic Caucus. And the Senate in 2018 went from 1 out of 11 Democrats being a woman to 8 out of 16. So wow. Overnight, it went, from such little representation to gender parity. So that was a huge achievement of our caucus, both caucuses in Michigan, but also we elected Gretchen Whitmer as governor, Dana Nessel as attorney general, Jocelyn Benson as our secretary of state, our party chair, Lavora Barnes was a woman, our chief justice of the state Supreme Court, Democratic woman, and 5 out of our 7 congressional Democratic delegation women. So it was just a huge shift in Michigan.
And how long did it take you to make this change?
Oh, well, this was a long time coming, and it was clearly not just me doing it, but clearly the election of Donald Trump in 2016 was a catalyst. I first ran in 2014, and I just told most women I just got mad 2 years before you did. And so what we saw was this tremendous organization across the state, just to say, this fight is not over. And it's not just electing people that, will stand up for women and their health care and their economic, success, education. It's about leadership too. And you have to actually have elected representation of that group too. So I remember during one of my candidate debates in my primary, that one of the questions was, what can you do to help women when you're in office? Or what's one thing we can do, that will benefit women? And I said, elect more women. And it was just, it was kind of a no-brainer for me. But it was a lot of groups really working hard to let women know this. That sounds kind of weird, but women traditionally have had to been asked and asked and asked to run.
Yes.
But I saw this in myself in 2014, I wasn't waiting for anyone to ask me to run. I said, you know what? I have a voice, I have life experience. I can do this, and I'm going to find out how to do it well. So I got training. And then when I realized that there could be much more training and much more recruiting to help women, that's when I formed my PAC and I started working with groups. Like we have a really big group here, again, that formed after 2016 called Femmes for Dems. They helped all over the state as well. And you just saw this huge collective effort to find great candidates. And I got to tell you, most of our candidates actually were women in 2018 and 2020. And we could see that voters really responded to that and wanted to give women that leadership baton and see what we could do, right? Things have got to be better. And so, it was just this great collective effort that happened in a very short time frame once we gained momentum. But leading up to that point took a really long time. And when you don't have a deep bench, when you're not looking at local races too and getting started there, it makes it harder to make that jump. But we were able to get that done in 4 short years, really.
Oh, that's great. So tell me, what was the impact as far as policy from all of that great success?
Well, I think what you saw now, again, like Indiana, Michigan is still dominated by the Republicans in the legislature. So unfortunately, you didn't see a lot of the bills passing that the women would introduce, right? So we have a Progressive Women's Caucus in Michigan, and we would introduce legislation on reproductive freedom, on ending the pay gap, on access to contraception, on public education, jobs, childcare, all of that stuff. And so the conversations started changing too, because sometimes it's kind of a long game. You have to make sure that people are aware of the issue, that the problem you're trying to solve, what your solution is. And so those conversations started to change, and we started to get more attention paid to that too. And so we are poised, if Democrats get control, especially, to just run with those policies. They're there, they're ready to go. We have a lot of experts in terms of the women legislators themselves that are ready to take that mantle and get those policies passed. Now, in the short term, some of the big accomplishments a lot of them are on the budget side. So when you're there, in Michigan, we had a $60 billion budget. When you're on the appropriations committee, or actually anyone in the caucus can ask for funding for projects or anything like that, you saw that a lot more was going to issues that women have been talking about a long time, right? For supporting and lifting people out of poverty, talking about projects with human trafficking or survivors, things like that. You could see the impact of having more women there when it came to the budget process as well. And that's something that you do collectively too. So that's a lot easier to get some of those things accomplished, even if you're in the minority.
That's awesome. Yeah, Indiana has so many problems on these issues. I mean, it's shocking to see what happens when women and Democrats have no voice in the legislature. Indiana is like number 3 in the country for infant mortality rates, number 5 for maternal mortality rates. We're in the top 10 for our toxic emissions. And at, of course, the bottom of the barrel for teacher pay and teacher benefits. So these are the kind of policies that really just get thrown out when there are not enough Democrats and not enough women.
Well,
So,
yeah, and I mean, that's why it's so important. Again, I specifically made that comment that I was 50 years old when I decided to run for office. And I was a IT professional. I stayed at home with the kids for 8 years and got involved in volunteering in the schools. And I was one of those busybody parents that was always trying to see how I could help the teacher or work with the school board or whatever to make things better for everyone's kids. I was on the state PTA board and all of that. But a lot of people that were in my position, like a stay-at-home mom, would think that they had nothing to offer to serve in office. And we're exactly the people that need to be serving in office, because we're the ones that are keeping the family together, driving our kids to school or to church or to jobs. We're working ourselves, and we are exactly the voices that are needed for good policy and good investments with our taxpayer dollars too. So I don't want any woman thinking they don't have the resume to run for office, because our lives are our resumes and we should be running for office.
absolutely. And as I told you earlier, starting in 2019, I was really very active, going around the state, talking to Democratic women all over. Wonderful, terrific women meeting, just wonderful. And that was the most common response when I would say, have you thought about, running for office or running for state legislature? And the first, response was, well, oh no, I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified enough. And these were women who had degrees and all kinds of experience, and women who really, like you say, were not, out there, mounting a big career, but really were managing all kinds of things in households and neighborhoods and communities, and really very well qualified to deal with the issues facing a legislator. And so it was really, and so my response that I developed after, hearing this. I mean, I felt like, okay, if someone else tells me that, I'm just, I've had it. But finally, I started saying to women who would tell me that, I would say, okay, well, if you're not qualified enough, give me the name of another woman who's more qualified than you. And oftentimes that would kind of shift the conversation. Women would say, well, yeah, I don't know. I am doing a lot of stuff. And so women just were not actually accustomed to honestly being asked and being told that they were qualified. And to be honest, many women in groups, and I would say, okay, how many of you have thought about running, but were told you weren't qualified or told you weren't tough enough? And almost all the hands would go up. So, that was the kind of feedback women generally get, is that they're just, they don't know enough. They're not tough enough. Oh, you've got kids at home. It just goes on and on. So
I
anyway,
gotta say, growing up with 7 brothers really helped my competitive edge there too. So I was always trying to keep up with them or exceed them. But when I ran in my first primary, I beat the sitting mayor of my city.
Wow.
And I did that because of all those years I spent working volunteering in the schools, helping the community. I had created this sisterhood. It truly was a sisterhood. And I knew friends and people that I'd volunteered with in every single corner of my district, and they helped me in every single spot. And that's one of the things that a lot of people will not even take into consideration, but we've built these huge networks of friends and, families that our kids, went to school with and everything like that. And it makes a huge difference. That's how you win elections. And we've got a lot of that, regardless of what your career, your professional career may or may not have been.
Right. So, all right, I want to shift gears a little bit and this is wonderful. And it's so awesome to hear about your success. It's very inspiring for me. But now, after having left the State House, you are taking on a new role, and that is the Senior Advisor for Lawmaker Engagement Network for an organization called Future Now, which I did contact. When I started this whole adventure, I thought, surely there's somebody already doing this in Indiana. And, search, couldn't find anybody. I was like, okay, well, surely there's some national organization who's helping states with this issue. And I did find a few, and Future Now was one of them. And in fact, one of the wonderful staff people there contributed some training for us, for our candidates on fundraising, which was excellent.
Yes.
But now tell us about what you're doing at Future Now, which I think is changing the name. Sorry, but tell us all about that.
Future Now actually formed again in the wake of the 2016 election, but for a lot of different reasons. But the whole idea was that, we need a lot of change in this country. We need to make sure everyone has health care. We need to make sure there's clean water, clean air. But we can't rely on the federal government to get this done. The way to get this done is through the state legislatures. And we need to make sure that we are getting people elected that have these values of passing policy that really improves people's lives. I mean, that's what we all want for ourselves and our families, is we want our lives to get better, not to be more of a struggle. So there weren't any real organizations, or too many organizations nationally, that had the sole focus on state legislatures. Right. And the other thing that makes it Future Now unique is not only does it help you with the policy side and share best practices from a lot of different states, but also on the political side. How do you get good people elected, people that have these values, that work really hard? And so it sees, the intersection of both of those. When you have good policy, that helps with better elections. And then when you have good candidates that support that. So they had a very holistic approach. Now, Michigan is a battleground state. We've been so close for so long to flip control of the state house. I was actually a client or customer, however you want to call us, of Future Now. So I worked closely with them for 4 years, helping us think through our policy agenda, what were our priorities, and what were some of the things other states were doing that would help us communicate our values and what policy we would pass. So I already had a great experience with this organization. So when I was trying to decide how to pay it forward, and let's make no mistake, after serving during the pandemic and everything else we had, the storming of the Michigan Capitol. They tried to knock down the door while we were in session. I could hear all the chants, seeing guns everywhere. It was a rough 2 years when I was serving as the leader. And I did have to take some time off, but I kept thinking, like, I could not have gone through all that I went through and not share those experiences with other lawmakers to help them hopefully have a little smoother time in transitioning into being a lawmaker, or how to develop strategy, how to get, how to do great constituent services. So when I was reflecting on where I could actually put my time and energy and really get something out of it, Future Now was a no-brainer, because as the senior advisor for lawmaker engagement, I talked to lawmakers across the country and let them know that we have these resources, no charge for any of these resources, any of these services. On the legislative side with policy, we have a fellows program, we have, policy idea library, things like that. So my job is to let them know that there are groups out there that want to help and understand what you're going through. I went through it. And so it's to build that connection. And we are rebranding that function of Future Now, and it's going to be called the Lawmaker Network. So it's very clear what we do. We connect lawmakers with each other to have really great policy for the state and then therefore for the country. So our goal is to have America's goals implemented in almost every state if we can by 2030. So we're working on this path state by state to get policy passed, and also on the more political side through the States Project, that's another affiliate of Future Now, actually get people elected to change governing power in this country too. If you want to see what those policies are, you can actually go to americasgoals.org and actually look it up. It's good jobs, it's clean air, clean water, healthcare. It's stuff that's no brainer, and it's actually been, researched too, that they're wildly supported by Democrats, but they're also supported by a majority of Republicans and independents too. So it's common sense legislation that focuses on improving lives. It's people-centered policies. It's not special interests. It's not corporations. It's not tax breaks. It's not all that stuff. It's about what kind of policy is popular, economical, and improves lives. It's a great combination. So, yeah, I'm very excited.
What a great project.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So yeah, of course, I always come back to, well, we're going to have to get more Democratic women elected. to get these kinds of agendas advanced in the state legislatures. So, I'm so inspired by the work that you did in Michigan, and I hope that that I can call on you again to help inspire the Democratic women candidates that will be running in Indiana in 2022. We've had a lot of women already stand up and take it, ready to go. They're ready to run. So we're very excited about that. And we're going to be, of course, helping those Democratic women. I believe that Democratic women are in such a great position to speak to many of the concerns that both Republicans and Democrats have. The climate crisis. Women around our state see their children being impacted by poor air quality, contaminated water, contaminated soil, and women think about the future of that situation. Women who can contemplate that being the future for grandchildren is, cannot cope and will not stand for it. And so, and I think Democratic women are really, in a good position. And of course, and I would love to hear what's happening in your state as far as abortion. Of course, it's going to be on the agenda here in Indiana. One of the state senators, I think it's a senator, Liz Brown, has already introduced a bill. We don't even go into session until January. But she's already got a bill ready to introduce that is exactly like SB 8 out of Texas. And so we'll be having that fight. And of course, Democratic women candidates, in my opinion, are certainly in the best position to argue about having control of our own bodies, our own health, and our own financial security. So Democratic women, I think they're ready to lead in Indiana. And we hope that we have the same, wave of Democratic women elected, just like in Michigan. And hopefully we will get much closer to, breaking the supermajority in Indiana, which is just
that's really important. I just want to give one more shout out for for running for office. It's not only being a woman, but the diversity of age is so incredibly important. The finding candidates of color as well. The other thing is, when I led too, we had the most diverse caucus in the history of Michigan too. We had our first Hindu American immigrant, a good friend of mine, Padma Kupa, elected, the first Armenian woman elected, the highest number of African American women serving as well. And those unique perspectives as well also make really good sound policy. We have a lot of younger lawmakers too. Like here, I was saying, how I was 50 years old, but you want younger lawmakers too. So when you talk about the cost of college, they are living it still. They're paying off those college debts. What it's like to find, to be able to afford a house, whether to decide to have children or not. Things like that are all policies that if you don't have representation there at the table, you're shortchanging, the lives of your constituents. So, you want to bring everyone to the table that you can, because it makes it more complex, but it's richer and just helps more people in your state when you have those different perspectives.
Absolutely. And that is just a concept that I don't know how we got away from in the last several years, because it just makes such perfect sense that, the more diverse, the more rich, the more complex and representative of the population. So that, I don't know, we'll get back to that. We will get back.
And life is complex. There's the, and women know that, and we're not afraid to tackle it. We know that, things are messy, and, being in government sometimes is like changing a dirty diaper. It's got to be done. Sometimes you got to hold your nose and do different things, but we get that. We really do. And that is why it is just so important for women to step up and run for office at all levels. Yes. Local, county, state, federal, all of that. We need a deep bench, the judiciary as well. And you think about it. Think about running. I know I'm trying to talk my sister into it. She's a high school teacher in Indiana. So.
Oh, really? Oh, well,
yes,
send me her name. I will give her a call.
Good.
It's what I do. So
Fantastic.
I would love to do that. So, all right, great. So thank you again for being with me today and talking about this. This is so important and very inspiring. We are really ready in Indiana. Democratic women are just stepping up all over, and we're very excited about the future.
Well, I'll be
So,
making a lot of trips and hopefully get to meet some candidates.
oh yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. And thank you to Future Now. I mean, I think I was so appreciative of their support, even though they weren't doing a whole lot of work in Indiana. They were, they were nice and supported my work in any way
Mhm.
they could, which was really wonderful. And it
Yeah.
helped our candidates a lot. So
Yeah,
it
it's a
was
great
great.
group.
So, all right, great. So, all right. So any final words of wisdom, Chris, that you'd like to pass along?
Well, how about gratitude and appreciation? Because for those women that have stepped up to run for office and to the women that are supporting those women,
Mhm.
we need that village. We need to wrap our arms around each other, support each other, encourage each other, and get out there and win these elections. And even if you don't win, your voice matters so much in your community, because if you're not running, no one's hearing those values, those problems you're trying to solve, the challenges, the hopes, the aspirations of your neighbors. And that's our voice. We're really good at that. And you should be proud of what you've done and keep it up. It's hard work that takes a long, long time, but we keep making these steps toward progress. I talked to you about how it happened in Michigan. You just got to keep at it. So
All
thank
right.
you for all that effort that you put into women running in Indiana.
Oh yeah, yeah, we're not finished. We got, we
Good.
got a lot of fight left in us. So
Good.
we're going to keep at it. But thank you so much again. So, all right. And then until next time.